City Hall, Power and Niccolò Machiavelli by Ciro Discepolo. In the American film City Hall, basically the mayor's office, 1996, directed by Harold Becker, with Anthony Franciosa, Al Pacino, Bridget Fonda, Martin Landau, Danny Aiello, and a very credible John Cusack. We talk about power like that precisely, that is managed in the mayor's office, of New York in this case. We are deliberately shown an Al Pacino in the role of mayor of the Big Apple, who seems to have had his legs shortened because he appears so dwarfed next to particularly long-limbed men who are there on purpose. The thing is exacerbated even by continuous shots from above, certainly designed to further underline his problem of modest height. Height, we could say, is one of the dominant motifs of the film, together with power, as I mentioned earlier. To his short build, Mayor Al Pacino, the Greek papas in the fiction, opposes a behavioral gigantism made of frenetic days, serious and important decisions taken in an instant, but also a lot of rhetoric and demagogy. In the control room of the most important metropolis in the world, the future of millions of men is decided every hour, and decisions are never easy to make. Behind all this, there is an imagined and never clearly defined presence, consensus, the one with which the mayor papas must, in fact, measure himself at every moment if he wants to be re-elected and thus maintain or even increase his personal power. In the movie in question, this aspect is certainly represented in a problematic way, and the viewer is constantly pushed to ask himself to what extent it conditions the individual choices of the protagonist. In an almost final scene, very emblematic, the mayor responds to the accusations of corruption that are made by his deputy, John Cusack, who plays the part of a young man full of ideals and illusions. Al Pacino says more or less, "What do you believe?" There is white, and he represents this with broad gestures of his arms and hands. There is black, and in the middle there is us. But you can't always choose between black and white. Sometimes you have to opt for gray, and there are many grays. As mayor, you have to mediate continuously if you think above all of the good of the city. And it can happen that once you do someone too much of a favor, and then you can no longer control the situation, that will explode in your hands. In short, The End That Justifies the Means by Niccolò Machiavelli, 1469-1527. Niccolò Machiavelli was born in Florence to an ancient bourgeois family but not rich, in which, however, he received a good humanistic education. In 1498 he became secretary to the Chancellor of the Republic of Florence, a position he held for 14 years, and during which he learned on the field the precepts that would later be exposed in his most famous work, The Prince. In 1512 he had to resign from office due to the fall of the Republic and the subsequent return of the Medici. Forced into exile in an isolated place, the rigor of the decree gradually diminished, and he returned to Florence to become the city's official historian, dedicating himself to the drafting of the Storie Fiorentine and resuming a modest political activity. In 1527, upon the return of the Republic, now elderly and close to death, he was again excluded from all political office. Machiavelli's fame is undoubtedly linked to his most famous work, The Prince, in which he sets out what can certainly be defined as a technique of government, or the exposition of the precepts to which a sovereign must adhere in order to retain power for longer. It is immediately clear in Machiavelli how the Platonic vision of the state, according to which the state is the practical realization of good, is substantially distorted in the name of a decisive and more practical realism. Machiavelli clearly sets out the theory that a sovereign in the conduct of the state must rely exclusively on practical considerations. Many have imagined principalities that have never been seen or known to exist in reality. This is why the sovereign must be more than ever a realist. Politics must necessarily adapt to the contingency of facts that actually happen, and not chase utopias and chimeras that necessarily end up distancing themselves from the facts and expiring into excess idealistic abstraction. The political principles that allow the state and the sovereign to guarantee order among the subjects and avoid anarchy must not be based on a morality totally external to the political system. Rather, politics must be self-normative, that is, capable of producing its own norms, since it is reality that guides the actions of the rulers, and reality often cannot adapt to the precepts of morality that preaches the absolute good. Sometimes it will certainly be necessary for the sovereign to act with violence, for example in the case of a court revolt. Machiavelli argues that if a sovereign were to stick only to the supreme principles of good, avoiding all war and all bloodshed, he would soon fall into ruin. In relation to human and political matters, there are harmful virtues and beneficial vices. That is the fortune of the Manichaean sovereign, who wants to stick only to the supreme principles of good will be poor, while the sovereign who learns to consider vices and virtues as simple means to pursue a goal beyond any moral consideration will be more skilled. The aim of those who govern is ultimately to maintain power as firmly as possible. This reality will not always be able to reconcile with the need for ideal action, because actual reality also imposes cruel but necessary choices. Behind this realism lies Machiavelli's belief that man is essentially a traitor, an individual who acts, faced with a decision, for his own exclusive benefit. Therefore, the sovereign will have to watch his back from every collaborator and take into account in his decisions the fact that every man will always act in his own interest. Because this can be said generally of men, that they are ungrateful, fickle, simulators and dissimulators, fleeing dangers, greedy for gain, and while you do them good, they are all for you. They offer you their blood, their property, their life, their children, as I said above, when the need is far away, but when it approaches you, they revolt. Niccolò Machiavelli, The Prince. The end justifies the means. This is the maxim that can summarize the content of The Prince. If the goal is in fact peace in the kingdom, and the union and obedience of the subjects, every means, whether in accordance with morality, even if in Machiavelli's philosophy this would constitute a purely accidental fact, or absolutely indifferent to it, would still be right if it is able to achieve the goal to which it tends. Thus, the other important theory expressed by the Prince emerges. There is a reason of state that is superior to any other moral consideration, for which the sovereign must adhere only to it if he wants to do the good of his kingdom, or to practically achieve, even at the cost of cruelty and war, the peace and prosperity of his people, expressed by the obedient union of the subjects.